A city is freezing under a glass storm as every lifeline fails and the skies go dark, when a quiet mechanic answers a desperate call from a mother whose dragonling is losing breath with every second, forcing him into a race on foot through broken streets and buried tunnels, where one wrong step could end a life before he reaches the light of the care center. If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to the channel and like the video, and tell us where are you watching from. Now, let's jump into the story. The glass frost had been biting Emberford for 7 long hours when the shop phone woke to life and changed Darren Holt's evening. He had been hunched over a dragon harness buckle, easing a stubborn pin back into place, while his 2 kids, Lena and Micah, built a lopsided fortress of blankets in the warm corner of the room. The storm rattled the shutters like a handful of bones, and even the bioheat roads outside were dim blue ghosts under coats of ice. Mechanic Holt crackled a strained voice, washed thin by interference. "We need ground transport to the aerial care center. A dragonling can't breathe. Sky static has grounded everyone." Darren set the tool down and pressed the handset close. "Where?" "Skycrest Spire," the voice said, and then the line spat sparks and nearly died. "Name is Bryn. The matriarch is Solora. You are the only one near with neural shielding and frost training. Please." The line fell into a hiss. For a moment, the shop was only storm and silence, and the soft creak of blanket fort walls. Darren pictured his children sleeping on the other side of tonight, mouths open, fingers curled, ordinary and safe. He pictured another family's child laboring for air. He wiped his hands on a rag and nodded to himself. "Lena, Micah," he said gently, "I have to help someone. Mrs. Ree next door will stay with you. I will be careful." Lena's eyes were wide, but steady. Micah handed him the small luck coin they traded before tests and long days. "Bring it back," Micah whispered, "with a story." Darren pulled the neural hood from its hook. The hood looked like a thin quilt of dark leaves, each leaf a tiny guard against the burning gnaw of sky static. He loaded thermal blankets, quick seals, a breath monitor, and a coil of rope. He stepped into the storm, and the cold pressed its mouth against his throat. Skycrest Spire stood in the storm's center like a tall candle trapped under glass. The roads had failed. Heat veins cracked and froze. Emergency beacons blinked like tired eyes. Halfway there, an old door opened, and Miss Ree reached out with a wind lantern. "Take it," she said. "It remembers paths in bad nights." Darren did not argue. He took the lantern and bowed his thanks. At the spire's base, ice slicked the steps into shining traps. A golden form descended through the blown snow, wings tight, breath shimmering like crushed foil. Even a layperson would recognize her. Solora's scales carried the history of trade councils and 1,000 decisions, heavy as iron. Tonight, all that power had narrowed to one trembling hope. "You came," she said, voice hoarse. "My child cannot draw air. Healers cannot keep to the sky. Can you take him to the center?" "Yes," Darren said. The word made a small, warm room around them. "Show me." They climbed a spiraling ramp where inlays of metal caught faint light. Wealth whispered from the walls, but the whisper collapsed when Darren saw Bryn. The tiny dragonling lay curled in a nest of woven heat cords. Copper-bright scales had gone to dull brown. Each breath quivered through the small body like a shaken leaf. When Darren bent near, Bryn's eyes opened, dark and frightened, but steady. "Hey there," Darren said, and he let his voice find the shape he used when Lena had bad dreams. "I'm Darren. I fix things, and I carry things too. I can carry you. What's your name? Bryn, the child whispered. Even that sounded like it cost a coin he could not spare. Darren counted breaths, watched the color, and read the monitor's faint line. Bryn needs what this place cannot give, he said to Solora. We have to move him. I will make a carrier that keeps his chest free and warm. We will walk. Walk, Solora repeated, tasting the impossible. Through this, she gestured toward a world of ice and sky static. Even I cannot stay steady above it. I will not fly, Darren said. I will take the old ways. I trained for the northern work sites. I know where Emberford hides its roots. The hood will blunt the static. Your job is to help me make shelter out of minutes. Solora's gaze sharpened. Then I will take a form that fits ground. Golden light threaded round her. And where a great dragon had stood, a woman now steadied a heavy pack on her shoulders. Her hair was a soft gold gone silver at the edges. Her eyes were the same, fierce with fear and love. Darren tied the sling, soft and wide, leaving Bryn's ribs free. He lined it with heat film and tucked a vent away from the wind. Bryn made a tiny sound when Darren lifted him. Not a cry, more a small surrender. Darren felt that sound in his arms. We will go in pulses, Darren said. Short pushes to warn stations. If a street blocks us, we cut under it. Ready? Solora looked once toward the window. The storm clawed at the glass like a living thing. She looked back to Bryn, and the world found its center again. Ready, she said. They stepped into a street that hissed and sparked at the edges. The wind lantern's little belly glowed. The storm opened a thin throat before them, and Darren walked into it, counting steps, counting breaths, counting the hearts he carried. The first block was a corridor of broken light. Heat pipes lay like cracked spines beneath the street skin, and each gust flung glittering shards underfoot. Solora kept pace in human form, steady and quiet. She learned the rhythm of Darren's pauses quickly, and every time he knelt to check Bryn, she pressed a heating stone between her palms and slipped it into the sling's outer pocket so it warmed without smothering. A young courier named Taj appeared from a doorway like a stray gust. His cap was rimmed with frost, and a satchel thumped against his hip. The East Run is gone, he said, not wasting breath. But the old maintenance mouth on Harrow Lane is open a hand's width. Folk forget it, but I play there in summers. It spits you out near the care center. Darren nodded his thanks. Go home, Taj. Tonight is for quiet rooms. Taj hesitated, then pushed a faded ribbon into Solora's hand. For luck, he said, and vanished into the white. They reached Harrow Lane and found the hatch, a square of rust almost erased by ice. Darren chipped it clear with a careful, gentle rhythm. When the hatch swung inward, the warm breath of the earth rose to meet them, carrying old dust and iron. Darren felt Bryn stir against him, a tiny ease, like the body recognized a less cruel world. The tunnel ran under Emberford like a forgotten route. Lamps slept in their cages. Darren woke them with soft taps, and coils glowed to life, thin but willing. Solora moved close, her steps noiseless, as if the tunnel asked for quiet. The wind lantern's glow became soft and domestic, a table light in a long hall. How far? Solora asked. 2 miles on the map, Darren said. But tunnels have their own math. We have to listen and choose. They moved past old painted arrows, past a wall where someone had scratched names and dates, each a tiny anchor against time. The tunnel narrowed near a service bend, cluttered with coils and boxed tools left behind when the city traded wheels for wings. Darren squeezed through sideways, shielding Bryn with his chest and shoulder. The monitor's thin line wavered. "Steady," he murmured. "I hear your brave lungs." Solora kept pace, passing packs through, catching them in silence. Twice they stopped, so Darren could tip Bryn and clear his airway, each time counting to 3, so the dragonling's small body knew the pattern. Bryn's eyes opened once, dark with question. Darren answered with a smile, and the old luck coin pressed to the sling. "Borrowed power," he said. Farther on, the tunnel split. One mouth was clean, but sloped toward a dim hiss that sounded like water meeting heat. The other curved into a shadow patched with old caution paint. Darren turned his head and listened like a person listens to a baby's breathing in the next room. "Left," he said. "The hiss is a broken feeder. I don't want steam tonight." The left path took them under a block where up above the storm had likely twisted signs and torn canvas canopies from corners. Down here, the air did a kind thing. It warmed a fraction and stopped grabbing at their throats. Darren gave Solora a heat stone for her gloves. She had not asked, but her fingers had stiffened. They reached a locked grill gate, its chain fat with rust. Solora lifted her hands. "Do you need me big?" she asked with a thin smile. "No," Darren said. "Tonight is a small tool night." He slid a narrow pry into the lock and coaxed. The chain gave with a subdued sigh, and the gate swung in. Beyond it, they found an old inspection room with a cracked bench and a metal cabinet. Darren propped Bryn gently in the sling against his chest and let his back rest for a count of 20. Solora opened the cabinet. Inside lay an ancient blanket, a spool of wire, and a dust-coated jar of candies. She gave Darren a look. He nodded. She unwrapped one and pressed it into his palm. He laughed once, the sound short and surprised. "For courage, like a child," he said, and tucked it into his cheek. The sugar hit like a small door opening. Bryn's breathing hit a wobble then, sharp and scary. Darren set the candy aside and went to work, tipping the tiny body at a careful angle, loosening the sling for more chest rise, warming the inner blanket with a heat stone wrapped in cloth so it could not scald. Solora crouched near, her eyes steady, her fear poured into stillness. The monitor lines steadied. The color in Bryn's mouth improved a shade. Solora's shoulders lowered a fraction. "We are not far," Darren said. It was a truth and a spell. They left the room and followed a thin ribbon of sound, distant siren oscillations muted by earth. The tunnel lifted, turned, and at last climbed through a service stair toward a grate where fresh night air pushed cold fingers through. When Darren looked up through the slats, he saw the blurred glow of the care center's facade, bioluminescent blues and greens pulsing like a slow heart. A final obstacle sat between them and the door, a spill of ice that had crept into the stair throat, freezing steps into slick glass. Solora tested each rise with her boot, and then knelt, hands braced, making herself a human rail. "Use me," she said simply. Darren did, planting each foot with care. He kept Bryn high and warm, kept his center low, kept his promises. They rose like a long-held breath, finally let go. The grate gave with a reluctant squeal. Night opened. The storm was still there, but the care center's glow made ashore. A team waited in coats, tight to their faces, gurney ready, eyes bright and worried. A healer with deep violet scales took one look at Bryn and moved with calm speed. "How long since onset?" she asked. 7 hours of storm, Darren said. 38 minutes through the tunnels. Sky static is heavy. My hood took some of it. "We have him," she said. "You did it." Darren let the sling empty and the weight left his arms. They felt light and trembling, ready to lift again if asked. Solora made a small sound that was both a sob and a laugh. She stood very still, hands folded, as if any sudden move might break the world's new gentleness. "Come inside," the healer said. "Warmth, tea, and news." Their feet crossed the threshold, and for the first time that night, the storm seemed like something outside a door instead of inside every breath. The receiving hall glowed soft, as if lit by a sleeping forest. Healers moved with the hush of people who had learned how to hold worry without feeding it. Bryn disappeared behind a set of doors, the kind that close like a blessing and a dare. Solora stood straight, hands at her sides, and then, with no audience but Darren, she exhaled years of command and let herself be only a mother for a time. Her shoulders shook once. She steadied them. A kind attendant guided them to a small room with a kettle that sang in a little voice. Darren wrapped his chilled fingers around a cup. He felt the ache in his forearms now that the work was paused. He felt the place where Bryn's weight had rested against his ribs, a warm echo. The violet-scaled healer entered later with eyes that were tired but gentle. "He is stable," she said. "We have opened the airways and begun treatments. You gave us time we would not have had. Time is often the first medicine." Solora's hands covered her face for a moment, and then she lowered them and thanked the healer with careful words that did not quite hold all they meant. When they were alone again, Solora turned to Darren. "You have done what my wealth could not buy tonight," she said. "I will not forget." "There is nothing to pay," Darren said. "I did the job in front of me." "You did more than a job," Solora answered. "You read a broken city like a map only you could see. You carried a child who was not yours and made him yours for those steps. Our world needs that kind of reading and that kind of carrying." She spoke then of an idea the Trade Guild had circled but never owned, a shared safety office for human and dragon spaces, with rules shaped by people who knew both body types and both ways of moving through danger. "I want you to build it," she said. "I want your eyes on our corridors, your voice in our alarms, your patience in our drills. I want your ability to see the small hinge others miss." Darren touched the cup, as if the answer might be warming there. "I fix harnesses," he said softly. "I raise 2 kids. I am late to paperwork. I do not have the kind of education your council puts on its walls." "You have the education my city needs," Solora replied. "You know how to keep breath inside a body. You know how to choose a left turn because a hiss means steam. We can teach forms and filings. We cannot teach what you brought through the storm." Darren thought of Lena's careful braid in the mornings and Micah's coin against his palm, and the way the shop smelled when rain hit warm tools. He thought of the tunnel's old names scratched into its wall. He thought of Bryn's small eyes, steady and asking. "Only if my kids are part of the plan," he said. "They do not need gold. They need time with their dad and a door to a kinder city." Solora's mouth softened. "Then we will make a place where your hours are elastic, and your presence does not disappear into meetings. The guild has a learning court. Your children will be in it if you wish. And Bryn," she stopped, breath catching for a moment. "Bryn will meet them when he wakes. I would like him to know the names of children who belong to the person who carried him." News came like a slow morning. Bryn slept under warm light and measured mist. Numbers on a screen shifted from worry to hope. After a few days, a small figure with copper brightened by care padded into a quiet room with pads under his feet that made him look a little like a kitten. Bryn climbed without ceremony into the chair beside Darren and pressed his forehead against the mechanic's sleeve. "Hello," Bryn whispered. "I remember your voice. It sounded like a rope when I was falling." Lena and Micah arrived later with a small book they had made. The cover said, "Shared Skies," in their crooked handwriting. Inside were drawings of 3 children, 2 human, one small dragon, all in winter hats, because Micah had insisted every good hero wears a hat. Bryn studied each page with grave attention and then touched his nose to the paper like a stamp. "I like hats," he said solemnly, and Micah laughed until a nurse told him to use his inside laugh. He tried, and it ended up sounding like a trapped bird, which set everyone else off again. The Trade Guild announced Darren's new role in a brief posting that used plain words. Together with Salora, he started to build a web of simple systems. Bright floor lines marked shared work lanes. Emergency kits fit both scale and skin. Quiet rooms dotted busy floors so anyone could step in and breathe without asking permission. Drills were kind. The first time a dragon knocked over 3 chairs in a practice run, everyone clapped when she remembered to check behind her for tails and toes. Months passed. The city learned to listen for whispers sooner. Old tunnels were mapped and lit, not just for crisis, but for children who liked adventure and needed safe, small journeys. Salora visited the Holt home often, sometimes as a woman with tired hands, and sometimes as a compact dragon who fit between the couch and the bookshelf with dignity. Bryn, Lena, and Micah invented games that involved both chalk and little puffs of harmless smoke. The neighbors learned to bake pies that pleased both human tongues and dragon tongues, which was a minor miracle and required practice. One night in late spring, when rain tapped the windows instead of ice, a city official named Director June Latham came by the guild office with a thin sheaf of papers and wide, honest eyes. "We have been tracking your changes," she said to Darren and Salora. "Accidents down 80-something%. Response times up by more than half. We would like to adapt your ways across the city, and not just the rules. We want your patience and your training style. Will you help us teach Emberford to carry together?" Darren said yes the way he had said yes at Skycrest Spire, as if the word were a room people could step into and feel warmer. The city began to change its shape to hold that yes. Half a year later, the next winter Salora landed nearby in modest dragon size and folded her wings with their old, careful grace. "When I thought power was only weight and coin," Salora said quietly, "I miss the power of a person who does not look away." "We all miss things," Darren said. "The work is in how quickly we notice and change shape." The Guild Board approved a proposal for an academy where training began together instead of apart. The idea was plain. Teach bodies and hearts in the same rooms, so in crisis, hands moved without fear. Director Latham brought funds. Salora brought rooms and teachers. Darren brought chalk, patience, and a love of small, repeatable steps. The academy's first lessons began under a roof made of simple beams and good light. A young dragon learned to say tail check out loud before turning. A young human learned to sense the push of warm currents and give space without being asked. In the midst of all this building, families broke and remade a few lines. Emberford's council recognized a form of kinship that did not care about blood or feathers or scales. Papers were signed and then put away, because the important part lived in kitchens and on playgrounds. Salora and Darren's households held a ceremony with ribbons and a potluck. They stood in a circle while Bryn, Lena, and Micah tied each other's ribbons and then tied one ribbon around all 3 wrists together. Mrs. Ree cried and laughed and told everyone not to tease her for being soft, because softness was how blankets worked. On the first anniversary of the Skycrest journey, the city walked the route as a gentle parade, not to savor danger, but to honor steady feet. The old maintenance mouth on Harrow Lane had a plaque now, small and plain. A path is a promise you keep for strangers. People touched it for luck as they passed. Children pointed and asked, and their parents told the story in simple words that made room for the children to ask better questions. Later that day, at the Aerial Care Center, the Violet Healer showed Darren some quiet scans. She explained that something in the mix of sky static and the shielded hood had kept Bryn's muscles from giving up in those long minutes. That discovery had helped shape treatments now saving others. Darren listened, not as a hero, but as a man who could sense how many pieces of chance and choice had braided together in a way that felt like grace. Evening carried them to the new academy grounds, still smelling of fresh plaster and sawdust. Lamps shaped like scales and hands were stacked in crates. A small stage faced a short lawn. The crowd was a quilt of faces and colors. There were wheelchairs and walkers, talons and boots, people leaning on canes and on each other. Children ran in arcs that made little comets of sound. Darren stepped up when someone touched his elbow and said it was time. He had notes, but they stayed in his pocket. He looked at the 3 children in the front row, and the words found their own way. A year ago, a door opened on a night that wanted every door closed, he said. We walked anyway. We learned that a city is not its towers, but its people when they carry together. Tonight we light this place so the next person who feels alone will see a glow and know the way. He nodded to the children. Bryn lifted a lantern shaped like a little wing. Lena lifted one shaped like a hand. Micah lifted one shaped like a simple circle, because he said circles mean everyone. They touched their lanterns to a shared flame. One by one, lanterns rose from the lawn into the cool, patient air. Up they went, a slow river of lights, neither dragon nor human, just warm circles drifting, making gentle constellations over Emberford. People did not cheer loudly. They breathed together. That was the sound, a city's lungs working in time. A few hands found other hands. A few wings lifted a little, not to fly away, but to make shade for someone else. As the lanterns climbed, a small alarm bell rang at the edge of the academy yard. Not a crisis, just a practice call that the clanning council had arranged. A young dragon had pretended to catch his tail where crates stood, and a young human had pretended to slip on a ramp. The nearest team moved without rush, steady and sure. The children watched them fix small problems with big kindness. Will there be other storms? Micah asked, eyes on the lanterns. Always, Darren said, but we do not meet them alone anymore. Bryn leaned his head on Lena's shoulder, an old habit that fit them both. We have a way, he said. We made it, and we keep it lit. The lights drifted higher, not as a grand show, but as a map you could see if you looked up. The academy's roofline held the glow like a cup. In distant windows, people paused and smiled, not sure why they felt braver, just glad they did. The night closed soft around the courtyard. Solora stood beside Darren, not as a matriarch, not as an official, just as a parent who had known terror and now knew relief. The city will remember this shape, she said, a hand and a wing sharing the work. Then we will keep the shape near, Darren answered. In pockets, on pins, in the ways we teach children to turn and look. The last lanterns found the high wind and leveled into a gentle drift toward the hills. The small alarm was silenced with a tap and a laugh. The crowd began to fold into groups and paths, not hurrying, not lingering, the way people move when they trust the ground. And that was the end for tonight. Not an end like a door closing, but an end like a breath you finish, so the next one can begin. The story did not shout. It promised. When the next call arrives, someone will pick it up. When the next path ices over, someone will remember the warm tunnel under our feet. And when the next child fights for air in a hard hour, hands will know what to do, because we practiced in peace and we learned how to carry together.